It's tea time with the monk again on October 14th, 2019. Welcome to the show, Venerable Panabasa Mahatera.
Yes, hello. Hail, Brian. What does the T stand for when you say it's tea time?
Tea time, like drinking tea with the monk. I'm sure some people watch you, their favorite moment with the monk, they get some tea ready. Oh, we got a new video with the monk.
Yeah, I'm more into coffee or maybe Red Bull.
I'm into coffee too, so
yeah.
Coffee time with the monk. So
although right now all I got's water.
Water. Well, that's not addictive.
It's water time.
It's water time. But I want to talk to you about drugs. You know, from a Buddhist view, of course, we have the 5 precepts. The 5th precept is don't take alcohol or toxins or cloud the mind. But I've heard even some Buddhist monks talk about LSD and how it's a way to expand the mind and how it's help people go over their egos, have a deeper perspective. I sort of have this gray area in the mind. Can there be a time and a place for drugs or no drugs at all? So give us a Buddhist Dhamma view on drugs.
Okay. Well, just the basic fundamentals would be like you mentioned, the 5th precept, which is, I undertake the precept not to indulge in what ale, wine, or intoxicants which cause cloudedness of mind. And with regard to that, I think the key word there is conducive to cloudedness of mind. Like not all mind-altering drugs would qualify, like caffeine. You mentioned coffee and tea. Caffeine technically is a mind-altering drug, but as a general rule, only the most fanatically strict Buddhists would say that caffeine is wrong, and a monk, not just lay people, but monks shouldn't consume caffeine.
Yeah, because caffeine doesn't lead to moral carelessness. Like if you're driving a car and you're drunk with alcohol, but caffeine won't lead to a car accident due to moral carelessness.
It doesn't make you stupid and unmindful. And
yeah,
that's really the point of it. Like the 5th precept applies mainly to lay people, like in Vinaya, the rules of monastic discipline, like in the Patimokkha, there's a different rule saying specifically that a monk who drinks alcohol commits a pachitya offense, which is a medium level offense, that you have to make confession to another monk in order to clear yourself of the offense. And that rule is even if you drink it accidentally. Like somebody gives you some cough medicine or something, you don't know that it has alcohol in it. You take a spoonful of the cough medicine and it tastes like alcohol, and then you read the ingredients and yep, it's got alcohol in it. Well, you've just committed the offense. Or like in Burma, in hot weather, like fruit juice can ferment and it can start turning into wine really fast.
I have a question about that though. Like it's about intention. If you had no intention, why do you have to confess?
Because Vinaya isn't just a matter of ethics. It's also, it's 2 kinds of offenses in Vinaya. There's sachitika and achitika. Sachitika means you have to have intention, like with regard to lying or killing. If you just say something that isn't true because you were mistaken, then that's not lying. Or if you're like telling a joke where you're saying something obviously untrue, but it's obviously part of a joke, then you're not deliberately trying to deceive anybody. So, that's not against the rules. Or unless, if you make jokes at somebody else's expense or something, but, or also killing, if you kill something accidentally, you're not trying to kill, then you haven't broken that rule. But then there are other rules that even if you do it accidentally, without intention, still it's against the rule, even though from the Buddhist ethics point of view, you may not have done anything wrong. But then again, some Vinaya rules, they're not really a matter of right and wrong. Like it's against the rules for a monk to eat in the afternoon. And there's nothing inherently immoral about eating dinner. That's just the way the rules are set up. And so, so it's not, the Vinaya rules aren't just a matter of right and wrong. There are some Vinaya rules that are there because of just like manners or ancient Indian tradition and this kind of stuff. Like it's against the rules for a monk to use a bowl made out of wood. There's nothing immoral about using a wooden bowl. It's just that according to the story, it's like the juices from the food soak into the wood, and you know, it's just this weird technical stuff. So yeah, I don't know how to explain this. It's just Vinaya and ethics are two different things. They overlap, but they're just two different things.
So you just follow the rules. You're supposed to just follow the rules then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I understand that.
But you can break the rules accidentally sometimes. There's no monks alive who have been monks for at least a few months who have never broken a rule, because you can break rules accidentally.
I understand that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So there's that. But I mean, going with like the bigger picture, then most Western monks of my generation have taken drugs before they became monks. I don't know what it's like with young monks now.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what it's like with young monks now. I can't speak for them, but of the monks of my generation, you know, who grew up in the 60s and 70s, maybe the 80s, most Western monks started off getting high. And it's not just any drugs. It's not like narcotics, you know. They weren't like junkies, heroin addicts, or anything like that. But you know, at least they'd smoke some dope. You know, they'd get high, smoke weed. But usually the way it works is that people would take psychedelics like LSD or mushrooms or mescaline, and they would experience like religious experiences or mystical experiences, like expanded consciousness. And then that works as a way of teaching you, for starters, that there's more than one way of looking at reality. And then from that, then you start looking for a way of attaining those same expanded states of consciousness without the chemicals. And then you get turned on to meditation, and then you start using meditation instead of you know, taking the acid or whatever. But in some respects, I have to admit, taking psychedelics is much more reliable than meditation, because some people meditate for years and they never get the same kind of expanded consciousness that they would get from taking, you know, 600 micrograms of good acid or whatever. But still, it's the way a lot of Western monks really do get interested in Buddhism or in meditation.
Maybe we should go into that a bit further, like to say, you know, people can meditate for years, never get any kind of transcendental experience. I've taken LSD myself a few times when I was younger, and it was a transcendental experience. But we should talk about that more. Does that mean like it's okay to take LSD? I mean, I remember George Harrison. He said you only need to take LSD once, you know, to have that experience. You don't need to keep taking it. So talk more a bit of, say, LSD or drugs like that.
Well, like I already said, Buddhist ethics are mainly a matter of volition. So it depends on, you know, why you're taking the drugs, what your intentions are, that determines it. And also, like I said earlier, the key point of the fifth precept is that it causes cloudedness of mind. So if you're going to take acid and it causes the exact opposite of cloudedness of mind, it's causing you to have like genuine mystical experiences with like wide open expanded consciousness, then it's not necessarily a bad thing, in my opinion. Although Asian monks might see things very differently. Like for the Asians, even to drink alcohol in Burma is sort of the equivalent of taking heroin in America. You know, it's like all drugs are just, you know, bad and immoral and you shouldn't do it, except for, of course, tea and like tobacco and the, you know, the really mainstream ones. But
I appreciate you saying that, because, you know, when I was 20 years old, I was at this, Ken Keyes had a center, the Cornucopia Center in Kentucky. I was there for a month, and someone gave me LSD, and I came back home to Fondle, Ontario. I booked off the whole day because this was intended to be a spiritual experience. I did it for the right reasons, and I felt this kind of veil was lifted off my mind, and had this childlike wonder for many hours. A very good experience. I wrote about it at the time, and I always look back on it, as a good experience. I never regretted it. Similar a few other times I've taken LSD was similar to that. It was always a pretty good experience. But you're sort of the first monk in a sense to give me a license. I was talking years ago. Ajahn Soni was talking about Professor Stanislav Grof, the psychologist, and he did LSD, and it really helped people as therapy. And he had a very thoughtful, insightful way of describing this. And I put up my hand and I said, well, are you saying it's okay to take LSD? And he didn't go that far. He said, well, we still have our 5 precepts. So he didn't really say yay or nay. So you're actually, I guess you're saying it's okay to take LSD for a Buddhist monk to say that. That impresses me.
It depends on your volition or your cetana.
Okay.
If you're just doing it to get high and escape from reality or whatever, then it's probably not good. But I mean, if you're having genuine insights or really positive effects, like one of my favorite memories was when I was living in Bellingham. I was in my 20s before I became a monk, and I had some relatively good acid. So I take 2 hits of acid, and then it's like a sunny spring day in May, and I'm just walking around in my shorts through Bellingham, which is a beautiful town, and I eventually wind up at this place called Waterfront Park. And I'm sitting on this hill, and the breeze is blowing, and it's a sunny, beautiful day, and there's little ants. I'm watching the little ants crawling around. There's wild roses in bloom around me, and it smells nice. And out on the bay, there's dozens of sailing boats just silently gliding back and forth, multicolored sails, and there's a little bit of a breeze going. So the whole bay, because I was on acid, it was like just covered with these shimmering sparkles, and then there's these multicolored triangles gliding back and forth. And I was in such a state of bliss that I was just spontaneously just blasting metta to all beings. I was just so happy and so full of love for my fellow man and the little ants and everything. It's like, may all beings be happy. It was just like spontaneously gushing out of me, and, that's not entirely bad, even if it's drug induced. It was just really a beautiful experience. It's one of my favorite memories, or it was before I became a monk anyway.
That's a good story about it. I'm reflecting on what the Buddha taught over 45 years. I think during the Buddhist time, they probably had access to some drugs. I don't think the Buddha actually ever said that. Well, in the right time and place, maybe monk, you could have this transcendental experience. Maybe he was thinking in the future, if he said that, then people might take it the wrong way.
According to Vinaya, marijuana is allowable. It's mentioned in the text that the word for marijuana or cannabis in Pali is banga. And I used to think that that's where the word bong came from, but I guess bong is from a Thai word that means a bamboo tube or something.
I think ganja.
Yeah. So technically speaking, according to Vinaya, it is allowable for a monk to use marijuana medicinally, and it's even allowable in Vinaya for a monk to own a pipe for inhaling medicinal fumes, which is like a bong, I suppose. But the point, the trick is that it has to be for medicinal purposes.
This is a revelation to me. This is very important that you say that. I mean, that's very significant. Never heard a monk tell me this. I didn't know that. That's really quite significant.
And also, when it says that banga is allowable as a medicine, it doesn't say how you're supposed to use it. And in fact, the commentaries, I assume the commentators were just making a wild guess. The only medicinal purpose for cannabis that they give in the commentaries that I'm aware of is that you're supposed to roll in it as a way of inducing sweating. So it's like external use or something, but
does it soak into the pores?
I have no idea, and I think it's possible they were just making a wild stab in the dark on that one, because I've never heard of anything like that before. But so the thing is, if you have a legitimate medical excuse for using marijuana, and it's not just that you want to get high, you want to go into a euphoric stupor or something, then technically it could be legal. But if you're taking it for non-medical reasons, then it would be a dukkha offense, which would be a minor offense, sort of like eating sugar in the afternoon if you're not sick, because sugar also is considered to be medicinal in some way.
Wow, that's good to know. So you can see the wisdom there. If it's medicinal, and I guess is it just for medicine or medicinal for the mind to open up the mind in meditation?
Yeah, I think that would be a personal judgment call. Or
Okay.
else it would be the judgment call of your teacher if you're still living in dependence upon a teacher.
And of course, Buddhism is very much about using your personal judgment. It's not like you just follow, like Islam, follow a bunch of rules. I mean, you have to develop your own insight, develop your own wisdom to have better judgment, of course.
Yeah, well, the monk is supposed to just follow the rules, but still the rules are there for reasons. It's not just arbitrary because God says so or because some prophet says so. There's always a more or less rational reason for it. But well, the thing a lot of people don't realize is that ancient India, I mean, in the culture of ancient India, drug use was fairly common. Like the Brahmins, they were doing soma sacrifices way back in ancient times, like Rig Vedic time. And they're not exactly sure what soma was. It's controversial. Some people say they know for sure what soma was. It was partly a plant called ephedra, and maybe some cannabis mixed in with it, or mushrooms or something. But I mean, that was part of the Vedic religion. Like the Indo-Aryans who invaded India like 1500 BC, the Aryan race who invaded India, they used cannabis a lot, and they were doing these soma sacrifices, and so it was just part of the culture. And so a lot of people like Burmese people, they don't realize just how different ancient Indian, like Indo-Aryan culture was from modern Burma. In some ways it's similar, but like the Burmese are extremely modest about nudity, whereas in ancient India you could walk naked down the street and it would be considered, kind of crude and barbarous and bad manners and all that, but it wasn't against the law or anything like that. And also using drugs, like even a lot of Shaivite Hindus today, they're smoking hash all the time. It's just part of their religion. It's almost like Rasta people in Jamaica.
Wow, this is very insightful. About the nudity, was it different for men or women walking down the street in ancient India?
I assume it's always going to be more dangerous for women to walk around naked.
Yeah, that's what
Although there is a weird rule, like the rules for bhikkhunis, that bhikkhunis aren't allowed to take a bath in a public place like a river naked unless there are a lot of bandits around. Because according to the theory, the bandits might steal the cloth that they're wearing. Although it seems to me that if there are outlaws around, it'd be even more dangerous to be naked than to have like a cloth wrapped around them.
Did I get that backwards? You're saying they can swim naked if there's no bandits around?
No.
If there is bandits around.
Yeah. It's okay for them to be naked if there are bandits, but not if.
But I don't understand that. That's because
the bandits might steal their cloth, their clothes.
But isn't that a bad thing?
Well, back in ancient India, you didn't have like textile mills. All cloth was handmade, and it was more expensive than now and harder to get than now. So there's all these rules about how not to waste cloth. A monk is only allowed to have 3 pieces of cloth for his clothing, and there's rules for you're supposed to maintain it. You're not supposed to lose.
Oh, I understand, but I can't get it. Like, why would they be able to swim naked if there's bandits there? They're going to steal their cloth. Why wouldn't they say you can't swim naked? Because
well, you're not allowed to swim for fun. It would be just taking a bath in a public bathing spot.
But why wouldn't they just say don't swim when bandits are around?
Well, maybe they just live in a place where there are always bandits around, so they just have to take a bath.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Of course, they'd be more subject to rape if they're naked.
Yeah, that's what you'd think. But sometimes the rules or just have these weird decisions.
You think there's less rape in ancient India there is today? I don't know. You think boys will be boys?
I have no idea if there was more rape, but there are rules protecting bhikkhunis. Like they're not allowed to live in forests. They're not allowed to travel alone, that kind of stuff. So it's always been, women are more vulnerable than men. It's always been that way. but we've wandered away from drugs.
Yeah, the drugs. How do we get onto that from drugs? It's a very interesting conversation. I'm learning a lot from this talk. Like just being able to take marijuana, that's news to me. Wow.
Yeah, but the trick is to use it for medicinal purposes and not for recreational purposes.
Yeah, but what I was going to say though, I'm only on 5 precepts because I'm a lay Buddhist. You're on 227 precepts.
Well,
so for me to, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot more rules than just the Patimokkha.
Yeah, there's more about hundreds of training rules.
Thousands.
Yeah, yeah. But for me as a lay Buddhist taking LSD, I mean, the basic rule is avoid intoxicants. So for me, compared to you, I guess you're saying it's probably okay if I'm doing it to expand my consciousness.
Yeah, so long as it's not causing cloudedness of mind and causing you to be stupid and unmindful and taking you farther away from Nibbana.
I think I'm just averse and afraid of taking drugs. What if I get bad stuff?
I was always averse to taking anything I could get addicted to, except for alcohol. Oh. I would drink alcohol, but anything that was addictive, I was wary of that. And obviously, I mean, that's one weird thing is a lot of monks smoke tobacco. And in Thailand, it's just considered, you can't criticize it because Ajahn Mun smoked tobacco. In fact, he was a chain smoker. And there have been a lot of famous Ajahns in Thailand who...
How about ours? Ajahn Chah, right?
So you can't say anything about it. But obviously, from a Buddhist point of view, I mean, tobacco is more addictive than heroin. You get addicted to it easier than with heroin. And I mean, addiction is craving, and that's the cause of all suffering. So obviously, if tobacco existed in ancient India, the Buddha would not have allowed monks to smoke tobacco. But you can't say that because Ajahn Mun smoked tobacco, and anything Ajahn Mun did is okay. Ajahn Mun ate cheese in the afternoon, therefore eating cheese in the afternoon has to be okay because Ajahn Mun was an arahant, or at least they believe he was an arahant. So there you go. But obviously, to me, tobacco would be, I mean, considering that it causes craving. Yeah, and it's physically addictive.
So if the Buddha was around with smoking, he would say a rule: don't smoke. But when did smoke originate? Like 1,000 years later in India, something like that?
Tobacco is native to North America. So like Sir Walter Raleigh, like what, 1500s?
Oh,
he's the one who brought tobacco back to England from North America.
Oh, so that's when smoking began in the world from the Indians, you mean?
Yeah, so it wasn't until modern times that people in India had tobacco.
Oh, I see, yeah.
But they had, I mean, they're smoking marijuana if they were smoking anything, probably.
Yeah, I was never concerned about getting addicted to anything. I'm not addicted to anything. I was just more concerned with getting bad stuff, bad drugs that'll kill you, that kind of thing. So I just stay away from drugs.
Oh yeah, but then again, people go skiing or something instead. They consider that to be healthier, and they break their leg or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But me as a kid, I mean, I was good in school. I was a bright kid and good student and all that. But even so, I looked forward to being old enough to start taking drugs the way a lot of guys look forward to getting old enough to lose their virginity. For some reason, in fact, I had this theory that in a past life, assuming that there are past lives, that I was...
well, we assume there are past lives. I mean, you're a Buddhist, I'm a Buddhist.
There are past lives.
Yeah, that, we assume that.
Well, it's a working hypothesis, yeah.
Okay.
But I had this idea that maybe I was like a shaman living in like northwestern India during the Indus Valley civilization, and I used drugs as a way of attaining altered states of consciousness. And I may have worshipped snakes.
Wow, so that impression came to you.
Yeah, well, it just helps to explain certain personality traits I have in this life that it would be hard to explain through genetics and past experience.
Okay, what's your relationship with snakes in this life?
I just really like snakes.
You know what?
I'm really happy when I see a snake, especially if it's a big one.
As a kid, we lived in Victoria, here in British Columbia. When I was 4 years old, I liked snakes. I would chase after them. I'd pull them. I thought I was pulling out of the holes, but they don't live in holes. But I would pull at snakes and grab snakes. I loved snakes as a kid. And all through my life, I've never really been afraid of snakes. I'm afraid of spiders, but I've always liked snakes as well. Woo!
Yeah, well, considering that we grew up in the Pacific Northwest, all the snakes are harmless, little garter snakes and racers.
That's what I saw. Yeah.
But even like living in Burma, where you've got Russell's vipers and cobras and kraits, still, I just really like snakes. First time I saw a cobra, I was just thrilled. That was just really a major thrill for me to see my first wild cobra. That was just magnificent.
Remember Ajahn Brahm telling the story at Wapan Adichan, he's walking out at night, like a little light, and then he saw this big snake coming across the path, so he waited. It took a long time for it to get through. It was such a long, huge, big, long snake, and what a kind of a scary experience that was, but he held his mindfulness. So you were drawn to snakes, you enjoyed snakes.
Yeah, I like snakes.
Yeah. When I was a monk, I visited our abbot Ajahn Sawat. I had to go see him for something. He said, Sinek, and I didn't know what he was saying. He had got the stick, and there's this big snake right in the Vihara. He picked it up like this. It was like 6-7 foot long green snake, and just calm. He puts it outside, very calm and mindful. And it's like a snake. Yeah, living in Thailand, you see snakes. I'm sure Burma you saw a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although mostly where I was seeing vipers, plus just regular like rat snakes and stuff. But the main poisonous snake in central Burma is Russell's viper, which is really gnarly. They're really a mean snake. I mean, we've wandered away from drugs at this point. But
how big is a viper?
A Russell's viper, it can get maybe 5 or 6 feet long, and because it's like a rattlesnake, it's fat, it's thick. And the thing is, they're not the most poisonous snake in Burma, but they're the meanest. Most people who die of snake bite die from Russell's viper because, I mean, they'll actually chase you. I had a little baby Russell's viper like this, maybe 1.5 feet long, was actually chasing after me. And they use it as a way of scaring you. It's like, don't fuck with me. But still, it's yeah, you got to be really careful about Russell's vipers in like central Burma.
Well, I like throwing in these monk stories anytime. Off topic, it doesn't matter. That's cool. Burma stories.
Yeah, getting back to drugs, though, I could say that Ram Dass, of course, Ram Dass started off with drugs too. Like he was experimenting with hallucinogenic drugs with Timothy Leary at Harvard back in the early 60s, I think.
And I'd say he was also part of the globalist agenda of Laurel Canyon social engineering in the 1960s, being a professor at Harvard. I think it's a globalist center. That's my view on Ram Dass and
yeah, well, I doubt that he's involved in any Jewish conspiracy by experimenting with drugs, or at least.
Well, I'd say it's a globalist conspiracy. I didn't say Jewish conspiracy.
Even if he started off that way, he was having, the same kind of mystical experiences, like very expanded consciousness states, so that he wound up going to India, like I said earlier, trying to find a way of reproducing those states through meditation or yogic techniques or something like that. So he's trying to, after realizing that there are these expanded states of consciousness, then he's wanting to learn how to attain those states without the chemicals. So that's why he went to India, and also he brought some acid with him when he went to India to see what the effects were, or on like a meditation master. Then of course there's the famous story of his guru Neem Karoli Baba taking 1,200 micrograms of very pure pharmaceutical LSD and it having no effect. That's an interesting story in itself. But he met one Swami, I guess he was, who told him, or maybe he just read it somewhere, I don't know, but there was a famous Indian Swami who said that God came to America in the form of LSD because Americans are materialists, and so they want their God in the form of a material substance. And, there might be something to that. And to the extent that something like acid really does wake people up to higher states of consciousness, and also just it demonstrates to you that there is more than one way of looking at reality. And once you have more than one way of looking at reality, you can kind of triangulate. It gives you more of a sense of perspective. So in that sense, using drugs as a kind of spiritual tool, at least for starters or something, it can be useful. And also, like among the New Agers now, it's like ayahuasca is in fashion. I don't
Yeah, I was
know.
going to ask you about different drugs. Like there's ecstasy, like LSD is old hat. Like there's ecstasy. What modern drugs might be better than LSD? And we can talk about ayahuasca.
Well, I've never taken ecstasy, and so I can't really speak from experience on that. But I have taken ayahuasca a few times, and it's done
Well,
at these ceremonies. That's how it kind of is. Um, it's kind of legal in America because it's like a religious ceremony. You're following like this shamanic rituals from Colombia or Peru or someplace like that. And for me, it was really helpful because I'm really a head-oriented person. I'm not a very heart-oriented person. But what ayahuasca does, one of the things it did, is it just blasts your heart wide open. So I got more insight into what it's like to be a more heart-oriented, compassionate person, you know. And also, there's just these weird things that happen, like when I was on ayahuasca. Um, it's really, I mean, most people puke when they take ayahuasca, and they say that it's not really an emetic. It's not a physical thing. It's a psychological thing. You're under so much stress that we have like this reflex that if we're under lots and lots of stress, we puke just in case it's something we ate. You know, it's just sort of like an automatic reflex thing. And the ayahuasca thing is so stressful. It's not pleasant. I've never really had an enjoyable ayahuasca trip. I've taken it like, I don't know, 4 times, something like that. And it's like sometimes it's like the pain of the universe is just gushing through your chest. It can be really harrowing experience.
did you take it before you're a monk or while you're a monk?
No, this was while I was a monk.
Okay.
This was like when I went back to Bellingham. And I'm
Wow.
living with the New Age people, and then somebody says, "Hey, you want to do an ayahuasca ceremony?" There's one, actually, it was in Vancouver where we went. So we went to Vancouver and did an ayahuasca ceremony, and these people were brave people.
Sorry, I missed you. I wasn't there. I've never done one.
Yeah, but you have to be brave. Although some people they take it, and I asked, you know, how was your journey, because they call it a journey, you know. And oh, it was lovely. It was fine. And it's like, wow, do you take the same stuff I took? It just turns me inside out. But the effects of it compensates for it. I mean, even though it's just a horrible situation and I'm puking my guts out and everything, there's so much positive effects also that it's worth it, or at least it was. There's like different formulas. One is called yahe, which is like the Ecuadorian or Colombian version. And then there's the Peruvian ayahuasca. It's the same stuff, except the Peruvian ayahuasca has like some extra ingredient that adds more psychedelic effects and also makes the stuff taste less horrible. And it's just really horrible tasting stuff. It's just awful. But these weird things happen, like if I had positive mental states, everything was fine. You know, like I'm happy, or I'm thinking yes, or meditating like Om, something like that, then everything's fine. But if I start having any negative thoughts at all, like just remembering how awful the stuff tasted, I would start this downward spiral into nausea, and just everything would just be horrible, and I'd be puking my guts out. So in a way, it was you had to watch your mind really carefully just to make sure that you've got positive mental states going, because if you get caught in this spiral of negativity, it just wrecks you. So that kind of stuff, I mean, it can be useful for some people, maybe not for everybody, but it can be useful for some people. And so I'd be sitting there trying to meditate through it, and then a lot of people, or I shouldn't say a lot of people, some people would come up afterwards, come up to me and say, you know, I really was inspired by you meditating. And some other people would start meditating when they'd see me meditating, you know, at least trying to sit up through the thing.
Okay, would you recommend, if you have a choice between traditional LSD or ayahuasca, which would you take?
I think it would depend on the person. Like if you want like ayahuasca is just more of a visceral experience. LSD is more of a head trip. So if what you're after is like expanded consciousness, maybe a chemical induced mystical experience, then you'd probably be better off with the LSD. But if you want your heart blown wide open and to experience like, intense compassion for everyone around you, then probably you're better off with the ayahuasca.
Well, people tell me ecstasy, I've never taken, but people tell ecstasy really just opens up the heart and you don't get really sick the way you would with ayahuasca.
Yeah, although I've never taken it, so I can't really speak about that.
But if you yourself had a choice tomorrow, which would you take, LSD or ayahuasca?
Oh, if I was going to take it tomorrow, it'd be LSD, but like ayahuasca, next week? You go to you have to be ready for it, and you go to a ceremony, and there's like the shaman there who mixes it and hands out the cups of everything, and I found that like a female shaman works better for me because it's such an intense, difficult, harrowing experience. Just the soft, soothing, gentle female voice kind of guiding you through it was helpful. And she'd just like recite poetry sometimes or play the guitar sometimes. And I remember one time she started reciting poetry and then you just had to stop in mid-sentence because she was tripping on it too, or journeying on it. But yeah, it's also just kind of an ascetic experience, because it's not easy, it's not comfortable. At least it never has been for me.
Well, you like asceticism, so maybe it suits a monk better than a lay person.
Yeah, it depends on the person.
Yeah. How many Buddhist monks do you think would agree with you on this?
On what in particular?
Well, the idea of taking LSD or ayahuasca for those reasons that you described.
Well, like I said, most Western monks of my generation started off that way also. So probably there would be quite a few Western monks who would acknowledge that there are positive reasons, or it can be useful.
But I wonder if they would do it as a monk. Maybe I have this Puritan idea of being the lay Theravada Buddhist. I look up to Theravada Buddhist monks more than anyone in the world. So maybe I have this goody two shoes idea, Yeah. Like, would they take it themselves? That's my question.
Or more of a traditional Asian attitude where it's just all bad or all akusala or whatever.
Like you wrote this short blog post about me. I put on my website as well, saying, well, I'm a devout, to Hitler, but I'm even more devout Theravadan Buddhist. So like you're saying, I'm the fundamentalist devout Theravadan Buddhist, and you're more the rational Western Theravadan monk.
Yeah, you're definitely more faith oriented than I am. I'm more skeptical of what the Buddhist texts say than you are.
Sure, we both agree on that.
But then again, as Vinaya says, cannabis is allowable medicinally.
There you go. Yeah, so we had LSD, ayahuasca, and cannabis. What else would you like to say on drugs and Dhamma?
Oh, well, that was like how I started off with spirituality. Like Ram Dass was my hero when I was in high school. He was like one of my first spiritual teachers. And he started off with drugs, and I was into drugs at the time. So that was just perfect for me, using drugs as a kind of spiritual guide or a spiritual vehicle, and that was kind of my religion. My religious practice before I became a monk was, the practice itself was taking psychedelic drugs. Like I'd go backpacking out into the wilderness, in the Pacific Northwest, there's lots of wilderness areas, just backpack alone out into a wilderness area and, take 500 micrograms of acid. And that was sort of my spiritual practice before I became like a meditating monk.
Cool.
Yeah. So, I'm sort of, I don't know if you'd say I'm in favor of it, but definitely I'm not, entirely against it. But it depends on your volitions. It depends on your cetana, why you're taking it, that are instrumental in determining whether it's kusala or akusala, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome.
Well, that sounds all very rational, reasonable to me. Yeah. Anything Anything else we should cover in the talk?
Well, there's one thing I wrote about. I wrote a post on my old blog about ayahuasca, and I mentioned that some people will say that, you know, drugs are just like artificial reality, you know, or my father used to say, you know, drugs are an escape from reality, but
I don't believe it.
It's not necessarily the case. Like, probably my favorite novel is The Idiot, Dostoevsky's The Idiot. And The Idiot is this Prince Mishkin who has epilepsy. He has temporal lobe epilepsy. And Dostoevsky also had temporal lobe epilepsy, so he based that on himself. And there's this one scene where Prince Mishkin is walking through the streets of, I don't know, St. Petersburg, I guess. And he's thinking about how right before he has a seizure, everything becomes just perfectly clear and perfect. You know, it's like he's seeing through the eyes of God almost. And he reminds himself that that's just a symptom of a disease. But still, he's saying that, you know, it's such a profound mystical experience that, you know, it's worth it having the disease just for this split second of just crystal clarity and beauty and purity and perfection before the seizure hits. And so to him, it doesn't matter if it's a symptom of a disease, because it's the effect of the experience that really matters. And, you know, it's like the way the human mind is designed, we're not really designed to experience reality anyway. The purpose of our brain isn't to allow us to experience reality, it's to keep us alive long enough that we reproduce our DNA sequences. So, I mean, we're not experiencing reality even in our ordinary state. So that just because drugs alter the ordinary state doesn't mean that you're deviating from reality, because you were never in reality.
Yeah.
And so it could theoretically take you closer to reality, especially if it's expanding your consciousness. It's making you more awake or more conscious, then it can actually be taking you closer to reality.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But still, I mean, you're better off staying away from anything that you can get addicted to. You know, don't become a meth head or a junkie or anything like that.
Well, what you said about epilepsy made me think about natural states. Like when I was 17, I was diagnosed as manic depressive. Now it's more politically correct to say bipolar. And I've lived a normal life. I'm a high functioning bipolar, but my most mystical experiences were the manic phases. My most religious or profound or conscious, expanding experiences have always been my manic phases, more so than the times when I've taken LSD. So I've always had a sacred feeling about it. I've never regretted being in bipolar. I've always thought of it as an advantage to myself, even though, you know, in my 20s it caused a bit of disruption. But I definitely get in those expanded states, and to me, it's a positive.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been diagnosed with manic depression, although my mind does go through cycles, sort of like the Buddhist cosmos of expansion and contraction, you know. And when my mind is expanded, then like meditation is almost effortless. I can just sit down and just get right into it, you know. Whereas when I'm in the contracted phase, I'm just not interested in meditation. I sit down and my mind's just going everywhere, and I just, you know, I'm sitting there, but I'm not actually meditating. So yeah, the expanded states are wiser states.
Yeah, I should also mention, as a Buddhist, I don't believe in globalist psychiatry view that there's a chemical imbalance in your brain which creates bipolar. I do not believe that. I think it's something more just unexplainable, or something spiritual or whatever. So I don't agree with psychiatry. That's why I've never been hesitant. For years I've said on my show, okay, I'm bipolar, whereas other people would be so embarrassed. And of course, people, you know, criticize me if they want to be, you know, critics. I mean, so Brian Rui's a mental patient, blah, blah, they'll go on and on. But I'm quite open about it. I even had a playlist before YouTube took down my my channel called Bipolar Mental State, describing this. And in fact, I have this whole project I haven't finished yet, you know, talking about this. There's other YouTube videos I want to quote. It's just on my to-do list, because I'm a Buddhist. I'm interested in talking about mental states, wholesome and unwholesome, and how we work with them, you know?
Yeah, sure. And none of it's really reality.
I agree. Yeah. Like, what is reality? Like, you know, David can look at a lake. It looks like Amrita. A ghost can look at a lake. It might look like poison. A hell being can look at a lake and think it's molten lava. A human being look at a lake and think it's water. You know, what is reality? Yeah. Well, this has been a very good talk. Anything you want to summarize on drugs and Buddhism?
Yeah, just don't use what I've just said as an excuse to just start stoning out and using drugs recreationally.
Okay. Sound advice, Venerable Panabasa. Thank you kindly for your wise words.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi there, I'm Brian Rue. Please subscribe to the Brian Rue channel on YouTube.